В края на 90-те години на миналия век големият американски дипломат Джордж Кенън определи предстоящото разширяване на НАТО като груба грешка с епични размери. Джордж Кенън е създателя на политиката на сдържането на Съветския съюз и познаваше руснаците по-добре от всеки друг. Той прекрасно разбираше колко е вредно да бъде дразнена Русия. За жалост, никой представител на колективния Запад не го чу. НАТО трябваше да се разпусне, както беше разпуснат Варшавския договор. А вместо това пактът продължи с безумното си разширяване. И без изобщо да пита народите на въпросните държави, дали искат страните им да се присъединят към него. Нас в България никой от управляващите не ни попита дали искаме да членуваме в НАТО или не.
Russian forces have advanced near 8 settlements into Donetsk Oblast, according to the analytical project Deep State's report on January 13th. They reportedly advanced in Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, as well as Yantani and Vasilivka. Chasiv Yar and Toretsk hold strategic importance in the Donetsk Oblast due to their crucial geographic locations, which enable control over vital supply routes and access to key urban centers. Positioned on elevated terrain, Chasiv Yar serves as a natural defensive stronghold, allowing Ukrainian forces to inflict losses on advancing Russian troops. Toretsk is similarly critical, as its potential capture by Russian forces would facilitate further advances into the region. The Russian offensive toward Chasiv Yar intensified around the 4th of April of 2024, leading to intense fighting in the area. The outcome of these battles could determine whether Russia can threaten Ukraine's remaining major population centers in the Donetsk Oblast. The situation at the front in the Donetsk Oblast remains difficult for Ukraine, as Russian forces have increased their operational tempo in recent months, according to Ukrainian media. On the 1st of January, Deep State reported that Russian forces were present in virtually every part of Vasilivka village near Pokrovsk, a city that remains a key defensive line for Ukrainian defenders. The spokesman for the Portija Operational Strategic Group, Mr. Viktor Tregyubov, stated on the 2nd of January that Ukrainian forces controlled almost all of Chasiv Yar. On the 6th of January, Deep State reported that Russian forces advanced in Toretsk, Zeleny, and Petropavlivka, as well as near Vozdivizhenka, Baranivka, and Peshani in the Donetsk Oblast. The Institute for the Study of War reported on the 8th of January that Russian forces recently advanced in the northwestern part of Toretsk city and reached the administrative boundary of the city in one area after several weeks of more intensive Russian offensive operations in the area. On the 11th of January, Deep State reported that Russian forces fully occupied the city of Kurakovy. However, Viktor Tregyubov, spokesman for the Portija Operational Strategic Group, stated that Ukrainian military forces maintain positions within Kurakovy and I quote, "It's too early to talk about the complete capture of the city by Russian forces." Now, Ukraine's 28th Mechanized Brigade reported on the 12th of January that Russian soldiers are wearing civilian clothing to conceal their movements in Toretsk, in the Donetsk Oblast. In quotations, "This is another violation of the rules of war," the brigade reported, noting that such actions constitute a war crime under international law. The brigade reported that while Russian infantry attempt to divert attention and disguise themselves, their presence remains detectable through identical clothing, behavior, and sometimes even their weapons. The 28th Mechanized Brigade emphasized that this tactic, and I quote, "complicates the work of our soldiers, as the Ukrainian armed forces do not shoot at everything that moves, unlike, allegedly, Russian troops." Now, amidst these constant but gradual Russian advances, American Congressman Mike Waltz, whom Donald Trump intends to appoint as his national security advisor, said that in order to reach any agreement on ending the war in Ukraine, it is necessary to first stabilize the frontline. In an interview with a journalist of ABC News, Waltz said that one of the conditions should be to lower the threshold of the draft age in Ukraine in order to attract hundreds of thousands of new soldiers. When asked When exactly he intends to conclude a treaty to end the war, Waltz did not specify the terms of any truce, but signaled that it could happen any day, and that, and I quote here, "It is not just about weapons or ammunition or sending checks for new aid. The thing is that we need to stabilize the front so that we can make some kind of deal." Also of interest is a recent interview by Russian media with several Russian experts, military experts, on their assessment of the special military operation and the prospect for victory in 2025. Russian military expert Colonel LITVOKIN weighed in quotations, "With respect to the Kursk invasion, the Russian expert does not think Kiev expects to win. He then went on to elaborate further in the article. So today's video will cover the Toretsk and Chasiv Yar fronts, as well as an interesting article that interviewed two Russian military experts on the prospects of the special military operation in 2025. Now, as a reminder, alternative media, much like this channel, is often censored and demonetized by YouTube's algorithm. So I do ask that you please help by supporting this channel with super thanks donations, or a better alternative, which offers more value for your money, is joining the channel membership, where I have already uploaded hundreds of exclusive content, videos, and even my own unique analysis. Many of you have already joined and find value. So a quick shout out to my newest channel members right here, and let's get into today's video. So after months of fierce fighting, Russian forces have broken through Ukrainian defenses in the center of Toretsk. They have now pushed through the city to its northern outskirts, where pockets of Ukrainian defense remain only in buildings and on the spoiled tips of the mines. Russian troops are also advancing north along the Donetsk Sloviansk railway on Toretsk's western outskirts. Ukrainian media reports that the Russians already control most of the city as of January 14th. According to the media, in general, the trend in the city is extremely disappointing from a pro-Ukrainian perspective. In particular, active fighting continues in the central part of the city, where there are many high-rise buildings. Unfortunately, literally all of them, according to Deep State, came under the control of the Russian forces. There is also often a fixation of Russian infantry between the terracons in the northern part of Toretsk and the western outskirts of the settlement. These two areas are built by a private sector in which the Russians are constantly trying to hide, survive, and gain a foothold in order to further advance and occupy the city. Ukrainian analysts say that active fighting continues in the central part of the city, which is characterized by the presence of high-rise buildings and which, literally, have passed under the control of the Russians. It is noted that the fighting continues in the Zabalka micro-district, which was occupied by the Russians almost completely. Attempts to storm in the direction of Shcherbenivka and Leonidivka do not stop, but the units that hold the defense in this area of responsibility, and this is a direct translation from the Ukrainian report, multiply all enemy attempts to zero. In quotations, it will not be news if the northern part of Toretsk city comes under the full control of the Russian enemy in the near future, because the endless use of infantry, which is difficult for the Ukrainians to defend against amongst the buildings. In most cases, the Russians are hit by FPV drones and drops from Mavic, which demonstrates these means as the main ones for destroying them. And this is another proof of how much these means are necessary for our military and how important it is to involve society in fulfilling this need, Deep State says. Meanwhile, the internet showed what the city of Toretsk looks like now, where bloody battles are ongoing. The footage shows that there are not much intact residential buildings and civilian population left in the city. Toretsk becomes another ghost town. Medusa reports that Ukrainian forces will likely attempt to establish a defensive line north of Toretsk to prevent Russian troops from advancing toward Konstantinivka and Chasiv Yar from the south. Vasily Chinchik, the head of the Toretsk City Military Administration, reported on the city this morning of the 15th of January. He says that Russian forces are pushing to fully capture the city as soon as possible. He made this statement during a broadcast on the Ukrainian Espresso TV channel. In quotations, Russian forces are relentless in their efforts to completely capture Toretsk. They are using massive artillery and mortar strikes, along with tactical aviation to target the community. Despite this, our armed forces continue to mount a strong defense, even though the enemy has a significant numerical advantage, Chinchik stressed. According to Chinchik, the front line shifts constantly, with the situation either improving or worsening. Russian forces are advancing gradually every day. Currently, most apartment buildings are under their control. On Toretsk's outskirts, some areas of private housing and apartment buildings remain under the control of Ukrainian forces. The situation in the city is extremely challenging. Russian forces are determined to seize full control as soon as possible. About 60 residents are still in Toretsk, mostly elderly people, living under extremely harsh conditions in basements and shelters without access to proper sanitary facilities. Now, as to Chasiv Yar, Russian media Lenta reports that the capture of Chasiv Yar in the Donetsk People's Republic by the Russian military will disrupt the logistics of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Donbas agglomeration. This was stated by the military expert Colonel Vitaly Kiselev on the air of the Solovyev live channel. In the direction of Chasiv Yar, he said, "I think there is very little left to knock the Kiev junta out of the settlement. And most importantly, here we are already entering the last cities of the Donbas agglomeration, Konstantinovka and Kramatorsk. Chasiv Yar is located at the prevailing heights, and we will observe these settlements from here through binoculars," he said. According to the colonel, the Ukrainian military was seriously surrounded in this area. He predicted the victory of Russian troops at this turn and stressed that it would allow to expand the bridgehead and strike at the logistics chain of the armed forces of Ukraine. In addition, the military pointed to the high skill of the landing units in this direction, which learned to shoot down Ukrainian heavy drones of the Baba Yaga type from small arms. Earlier, artillerymen from Germany were spotted in Chasiv Yar. According to local resident Valerie Dorosh, the mercenaries moved on a Hummer military car and delivered ammunition for guns on it. Now let's move on to talk about the very interesting assessments from the Russian military command on the prospects of the special military operation in 2025. According to Colonel LITVOKIN, in 2025, we should expect to continue to increase the pace of liberation of the territory from the armed forces of Ukraine. I think that until we completely liberate the Luhansk and Donetsk republics, it will be impossible to stop. Moreover, the Kursk region should be liberated. It is necessary to create some security zones on the territory of Sumy, Dnipro, and Kharkiv regions, as well as Mykolaiv and Odessa, so that they don't shell Crimea, don't shell our Kursk, Belgorod, Borozny, Bryansk regions, and so on. Of course, Donbas will be completely liberated in 2025, and whether the main weight of hostilities will move somewhere from there or not, it's not a military issue, it's a political issue. Whatever decision the country's leadership makes, that's where we will advance. And will the country's leadership make such a decision, he asks. Moreover, Rammstein will be followed by Trump's inauguration, and it would also be suitable for this event if Ukraine achieved some success. And since it has not achieved any success, and its defeat is the defeat of NATO and the defeat of the United States, the leadership of Western countries, and first of all Trump, will have to think about what to do with Ukraine. I agree that in general, all attempts to invade the Kursk region by the armed forces of Ukraine, starting with what happened in August, have no military meaning. It is obvious. This adventure was just demonstrative. In general, all that Ukraine does is media activity, media events, and that's what they do, despite any sacrifices. Here, they have already lost more than 50,000 people in the Kursk region. In 2023, they lost 166,000 people in their so-called counter-offensive. But this does not stop them to serve the West, to fulfill the task set for them by Washington, Brussels, London. They are ready for any losses. They don't feel sorry for the Ukrainian people. It turns out that from a military point of view, Kiev does not hope to win, but tries to demonstrate its successes. Hope. Maybe they have some kind of hope. I do not know what hope is. Maybe it's schizophrenic. But there really can be no victory in the war behind them. Purely from a military point of view, reaching the Polish border can be considered a victory for Russia. It is obvious. But what was stated by our president on February 4th of 2022? Did we provide it? No, he says. They didn't provide it. To demilitarize Ukraine. Have we fulfilled this task? Not yet. Have we denazified Ukraine? No. Until these tasks are completed, there is no need to say that we have won. The point is not to occupy this or that territory. The goal is to solve these tasks. And now we move on to our last Russian military expert. And here's what he had to say in his interview.
Охуеть! Охуеть! Сейчас другой! Ебать, прям перед нами!
VASILY DANDEKIN, member of the Expert Council of the All-Russian Organization called Officers of Russia, captain of the first rank of the reserve, had this to say in his interview. The increase in the pace of liberation of the territory from the armed forces of Ukraine, I think, will definitely continue, because this trend is observed in the first weeks of this year. As you know, the city of Kharkiv was liberated the other day, and not only that city. The fighting ends in Toretsk. Well, in the Pokrovsk direction, we also cover the enemy. I think these cities will be liberated in the near future, and the Minograd is also a suburb of Pokrovsk, and the remaining territories. Plus, of course, we are talking about the liberation of the Kursk land. They often talk about what will happen after January 20th inauguration of Donald Trump, but this is, in general, a sacred date only for the Kiev regime. The upcoming inauguration of US President-elect Donald Trump probably means nothing to us. Trump has already postponed the terms of settlement of the Ukrainian conflict announced by him earlier for 6 months, and he said he would do it in a day. Now he has a dream to study Greenland, Canada, the Panama Canal, and even perhaps Mexico. In general, I think next year will be the year of liberation of our territories. First of all, in the DPR, although 3% of the Luhansk region remained under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. But initially, it is necessary to solve the issue with the bridgehead of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region. What will be done now? There will be quite long battles for Suja. They will be stubborn there until the end. A couple of weeks, I think, no less. We will probably have to use heavy flamethrower systems and anything. Please note that as soon as the Fab 3000 bomb was dropped in Zaporizhia, they immediately screamed. And when they send drones around Saratov and Engels, it's okay. These are, in general, elements of hybrid warfare, an information component, so everything is clear here. So these are the forecasts, and what will happen next? It will not be Zelensky who decides, as it seems to me, but the powerful of this world. The proposal to stop hostilities came from us last year. The liberation of all our territories, the non-accession of Ukraine to NATO, demilitarization, and so on. Nothing like that is observed. Now the reality in Ramstein is going on. Zelensky probably timed his last offensive in the Kursk region to this. But funding is getting smaller and smaller, and gaps are forming in the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine. They are used to sniffing on a fairly decent dose of the drug as drug addicts, and the more and more is required.